Hi guys, Paul Seils. Thanks for joining us for the webinar on navigating the Great Reset. We're going to be covering a bit of ground tonight, and we're going to get through it as quickly as possible in the next 45 minutes. So I'm going to just start with this disclaimer here. So the disclaimer is that information provided in this webinar or video, either live or if you're watching the replay, is general in nature and does not constitute financial advice. Everyone has their own specific situation and shouldn't be construed and constitute financial advice. Every effort has been made to ensure that the information provided is accurate and that individuals must not rely on this information to make financial or investment decisions, or a decision in that case there. So I want to share with you a little bit about my background, and I know some of you know me and we've got a bit of a presence online, but for those that haven't, a little bit about my background. I have a background in project management, spent about a decade in the Middle East and had a very interesting career there in project management, doing work on a lot of large projects there for design and implementation for projects including the ruling family and working on their palaces. And it's well known, those projects that are there, including the World and the Palm Island projects, etc. So that's my background. I had I joint ventured with a James Packer company in the Middle East for 10 years and built that organisation to 65 staff. I've also got some experience in real estate and property in Australia at one point in time. I was a licensed real estate agent, but no longer, so I do have experience. And then in 2013, 2014, created PSA, which is Paul Seils and Associates, and been coaching people in strategy ever since that point in time. So when I say it's about strategy, is we're not financial advisors, even though that we do have some people on our team that are, but we're more about strategy in relation to into what's occurring and what we're out to fulfill on. So I wanted to share this with you as well, and it's like everything that I've been through and everything that I would say most of us have been through at this point in time. The path isn't a straight line, it's a spiral, and you continually come back to things you thought you understood and you see deeper truths. And also the fact that pretty much everything in some interesting way has prepared us for this point in time and what we're about to experience. So my background, as I mentioned previously, was in project management, and then I spent some time in working as a privacy advocate, and I had really a lot of concerns about what was happening in relation to our privacy and our diminishment of our privacy, particularly with the information that people like Julian Assange and Edward Snowden had brought forward, exposing the denial of surveillance, and what we're pretty much under the assumption at this point in time that most of the information that we're and platforms that we're using, unless we're using encryption, is that they're not actually private anymore. They're no longer private, and haven't been for some time. So this was an event that I co-hosted with Sasha Stone about 5 years ago. He's become a good associate that I've had a number of events and panels, etc. with him. So this particular event was Big Brother Out of Control, and with Sasha Stone there, Paul Craig Roberts, who was a former economist under the Reagan administration, Professor Noam Chomsky, another Australian here, Max Egan, Foster Gamble from Thrive and Thrive 2, Pippa King, who's a privacy advocate in the UK, and also Gerald Salente there from Trends Forecast Journal that some of you might know about as well. So that was one of our early events that we had, and this is a little bit about my background. Some of the company of, funnily enough, they're all gentlemen. I don't know what happened in the women department. They're all the guys. So we've got Graham Hancock, for some of you might know, might have read his books and talked about the war on consciousness. I'm just going to manage this really quick. I'll run the show here by myself at the moment. Sorry, the war on consciousness. So Graham Hancock, Nassim Harriman, quantum physicist, again Max Egan here, John Pilger, who is one of probably the world's, if not even Australians, greatest journalists, and in relation to his integrity as far as journalism is concerned. Check out any of the books or the documentaries that John Pilger has produced. And then also, of course, just recently in the last couple of months, This is John Shipton, who is Julian Assange's father. So we've got a podcast coming out with Julian Assange's father later this month, and then hopefully that's on the back of some good news that we're got our fingers crossed for Julian Assange in relation to a possibility of him being pardoned. So we'll have some news on that, so stay tuned for information in relation to the podcast. Who else we got here? This Dr. Bruce Lipton, Michael Tellinger from the Ubuntu movement, David Icke, and again, Foster Gamble. I have a little bit of experience in relation to, and I have a lot of great connections with people in blockchain. And for people that don't know anything about what blockchain is, a lot of the cryptocurrency, so we're a big supporter of running this event. We ran this in August 2018, and this was bringing together consciousness speakers and decentralized cryptocurrency. So taking a lot of it's really quite an obscure fit, but it seemed to work. We had 250 people travelled from all over the world and all over Australia to attend this event. So that's a little bit about our background. So we also run a podcast platform and a private Facebook group and database called Messages from the Underground. So we do a lot of as an alternate news source and provide information and hopefully to be of service to people in relation to what they're dealing with at these times under quite extenuating circumstances. So what's happening? I wanted to share with you, I met Harry S. Dent some time ago. It was probably about 8 to 10 years ago now. He wrote this book called The Greatest Depression Ahead, and I found it very interesting and fascinating at the time, and it sounded really quite alarmist and sensationalistic at the time, because we would, to a certain degree, we were experiencing some sort of prosperity at that point in time. But I sort of dismissed it. I read it at the time, I met him, had some conversations, and so if you get a chance, check that book out. I think it's in audio as well. So it's very interesting and creates a little bit of context for what we're experiencing or what we're about to experience. So I just want to raise this with you as well. So this is event 201, and I wanted to say that sometimes a lot of us end up getting cast with the aspersion of conspiracy theory, etc. And basically it's a throwaway line for a lot of people that don't have the ability to be able to confront critical thinking for themselves. So none of the information that I'm covering off here is in any way a conspiracy theory. This is all information that's publicly available through the internet, and you can check this out for yourself. So this is event 201. This event was held in the US in the Pier Hotel on or about the 17th of October 2019, specifically to cover information in relation to running a exercise for a coronavirus pandemic. So this is how this is playing out at this point in time, and we'll talk about like what's happening and not so much like why it's happening, but it's really about the impact. This is going to be not what the games that people are playing, but it's really going to be the impact, and that's what we're going to need to be preparing for. This is Jane Halton. Jane Halton was the representative from Australia at that event 201 in the US, and she's actually the person that's giving the directives to the chief health officers of the states at this point in time. It's a bit of a facade. It's not actually the premiers that are running the show, it's the chief health officers, and they're all taking the directives from Jane Halton in this regard. So this is, and I know we've got international and overseas people that will be watching this as well, and a lot of this content is based around Australia, but this is the National COVID Commission Advisory Board as well. So just check this out for yourself. This is Neville Power. He's the chairman of the National COVID-19 Commission Advisory Board, and there's also David, I can't even pronounce his last name, but he's deputy chairman. So check that out for yourself. That's further into Jane. So talking about the Great Reset and what that really means, Klaus Schwab, his famous quote or quotes, the pandemic represents a rare but narrow window of opportunity to reflect, reimagine and reset our world. So There's some information that I'm going to cover off. It might sound negative, it might sound alarmist, but we're really creating some context. And I'm the sort of person that, like, if something's going to happen, I really want to know about it so I can be prepared for it. And that's what I'm attempting to do for others as well. If you get a chance, get it. What I will do in this video, I will post a PDF link of this book so that you can read it for free of charge without having to purchase that book. So what the intention of the World Economic Forum and people like Klaus Schwab is in relation to even this event, when we go back to 22nd of March of last year, 2020, when the whole narrative was about this is just going to be 2 weeks. So in the book, The Great Reset, World Economic Forum globalist Klaus Schwab asserts that the world will never return to normal, despite admitting that the coronavirus doesn't pose a new or existential threat. So there's a bit of information there that you can cover off on in relation to what they're proposing to do, in relation to what they're talking about in relation to the new normal. There's a short video here. I'm just going to play this for you. If someone can't, if the sound's not working, if someone in the chat can just let me know it's not playing, but it should be fine.
Great Reset.
This shouldn't have been too much of a surprise for Schwab, since his WEF had co-hosted the infamous Event 101 conference in October 2019, which modeled a fictional coronavirus pandemic.
The outcome of the CAPS pandemic in Event 201 was catastrophic. 65 million people died in the first 18 months. Economists say the economic turmoil caused by such a pandemic will last for years, perhaps a decade.
And he wasted little time in bringing out a new book, COVID-19, The Great Reset, co-authored with Thierry Malaret, who runs something called the Monthly Barometer. Schwab and Malaret admit that COVID-19 is one of the least deadly pandemics the world has experienced over the last 2,000 years, adding that the consequences of COVID-19 in terms of health and mortality will be mild compared to previous pandemics. They add, it does not constitute an existential threat or a shock that will leave its imprint on the world's population for decades. Yet, incredibly, this mild illness is simultaneously presented as the excuse for unprecedented social change under the banner of the Great Reset. And although they explicitly declare that COVID-19 does not constitute a major shock, the authors repeatedly deploy the same term to describe the broader impact of the crisis. Schwab and Malaret place COVID-19 in a long tradition of events which have facilitated sudden and significant changes to our societies. It is our defining moment. They crow, many things will change forever. A new world will emerge. Many of us are pondering when things will return to normal. The short response is never. With the pandemic, the digital transformation that so many analysts have been referring to for years, without being exactly sure what it meant.
Welcome to the year 2030. Welcome to my city, or should I say, our city. I don't own anything. I don't own a car. I don't own a house. I don't own any appliances or any clothes. It might seem odd to you, but it makes perfect sense for us in this city. Everything you considered a product has now become a service.
Has now become a service. So that's very interesting. So you'll own nothing and you'll be happy.
Great Reset.
Whoop, that's where we go again. So interesting enough, in Australia, and again I'm coming back to Australia, so the motion to oppose the Great Reset was defeated in the Australian Senate, and that was on or about November of 2020. I think by those two people, one of those might have been Andrew Wilkie. So we're entering uncharted waters at this point in time, and that also might sound a little bit alarmist, but we've never experienced anything like this before. And yes, there are some great things that are going to come out of this, but there's also some things to be aware of and to be prepared for. So Australians are warned that they could be taxed for a generation to pay off a $1 trillion debt as the budget blows out fighting the coronavirus. So it's the first time that the Australian economy has ever reached that level of debt. And what happened in the US is what also Australia is proposing to do, and that's what they call quantitative easing. So the RBA throws $100 billion to save the Australian economy. So what does quantitative easing mean? What is it and how does it work? So they're drawing the question here about is it a form of printing money? And interesting enough, I think most of the, an interesting statistic is that 35% of the currency that's in existence in most of the Five Eyes countries, that includes Australia, New Zealand, Canada, UK and USA, 35% of all that digital currency was just created in 2020, which is really quite phenomenal. So the main, and this is my background in relation to privacy and mass surveillance, and I think for me the biggest concern is mass surveillance. And as we're moving forward, probably one of the most valuable commodities moving into our future is really going to be privacy. So this agenda for mass surveillance, and as we've seen previously, is that mobile phone location data is used to track Australians. So it's a bit of a charade to think that people need to download COVID safe apps or whatever it's called in your country or location, because basically the updates of the phone have automatic tracking capability now, and they can track you via GPS locations, etc. Yeah, the Victorian Chief Health Officer flagged. So it's interesting, it's not even coming from the, that's what I said earlier, it's not even coming from the Premier anymore, it's coming, the directives are coming from the health officers to access phone records to track movements. Again, these are all, that's Sky News, this is all public information. There's nothing here that's all in the public domain. This is all in the public domain. Coronavirus, the new rule being brought in for New South Wales. Again, this was for November when I talked about it publicly then, and now it's starting to become a thing that people just don't seem to question in relation to QR code scanning for residents. So funnily enough, is that Chinese president proposed, or this is the QR code system, health system to boost travel amid the pandemic. So this is what we're experiencing at this point in time. Even though that it feels like it's localized to us, the whole narrative is being rolled out globally at the moment, but most, as I mentioned, most particular to the Five Eyes Alliance countries. And even if you want a border pass, etc. So it's like, it's almost like a goading or a conditioning of people towards acceptance that everything will become QR code scanned. So this is like for border passes, etc. One thing I want to mention as well that people should be aware of, that's in relation to the Defence Legislation Amendment, or the enhancement of the Defence Bill Response to Emergency Bill 2020. So what it does in effect is gives the Australian Defence Force or forces and foreign military forces immunity and power over Australians during emergencies, including, natural disasters or emergencies such as bushfires and the COVID-19 pandemic. So the question is, how is this being able to be enacted under a form of, fundamentally is what is a medical form of martial law? And how that's been able to happen is through this, if you can check it out, this is all public as well, the Biosecurity Act 2015, subsequently amended 2017, but under the guise of, it was introduced under the guise of food security, etc., and Ebola viruses or any other thing that would compromise the food security and livestock of the country. And so that's how that was introduced, as a Trojan horse, in effect, to be able to get that underway. But interesting enough, it's just happened in the last couple of days. I don't know whether you've been tracking the news in Australia, but they've sort of thrown out a lot of the fines. And this is a little bit about this. At this point in time, the Human Biosecurity Emergency Period extended by 3 months. Now, this is from the government health site for the MP Greg Hunt, but it was extended here up until the 17th of December 2020. So in effect, it's not actually current anymore. It hasn't been extended. So do your research on that as well. Fundamentally making a lot of those directives and instructions, they're not laws, they're directives, rendering them impotent or rendering them non-relevant. So this is all sort of heading towards what we're talking about in relation to the social credit system. So what is the social credit system? I'm just going to play this short video again for you here.
Everywhere she goes, Oh Young Hao-yu is followed. What she buys, how she behaves, is tracked and scored to show how responsible and trustworthy she is. It's called the social credit system, and in one version now being tested, a person's reputation is scored on a scale of 350 to 950. And Hao-yu, with a good score of 752, is okay with it. In fact, most people are.
It's a mechanism like pushes you to become a better citizen.
It's big data meets Big Brother, expanding how the government monitors, understands, and ultimately controls its 1.4 billion citizens. Thanks to advances in artificial intelligence and facial recognition, and a web of more than 200 million surveillance cameras.
Are people bothered by privacy concerns?
We think the lot of camera keep the safety is really good. We can accept it.
Companies are experimenting with the algorithms to help the government create the new national social credit system. The government also has pilot projects. In one, citizens are required to do hours of unpaid work to get benefits. And scores are docked for things like littering, a messy yard, gossip, even jaywalking. Video of offenders is shown on the local news. And information collectors like Zhou Ai-ni are paid to report on their neighbors. Her quota, 10 entries a month. Like the man who carried a drunk person home. A good deed, she says. Good social credit gets rewarded with perks like cheap loans and travel deals. But a bad score means public shame and worse. Huang Huijun lost a court case and didn't pay. Now he's on a government blacklist. I can't buy airplane or train tickets, he says, and the list goes on. Being discredited makes it hard to get a job or put kids in top schools. The social credit system will go nationwide next year, and few here are willing to criticize it. Something that may pose a risk itself for a bad score and the life that comes with it. Janice Mackey-Frere, NBC News, Beijing.
So, there we go.
Everywhere.
So people are of the opinion, well, that's just China. But the reality is that the social credit system has already been trialled in most of the Western countries, and primarily the, as I said, the Five Eyes countries. So Australia, China's Big Brother social, this is back from, when is this? April 28th, 2019. Australia's preparing to debut its version of the Chinese regimed high-tech system for monitoring and controlling its citizens. The launch to take place in the northern city of Darwin will include systems to monitor people's activity with their cell phones, etc. So do a bit of research on that as well. You can find all that information there. So we're talking about remedy in relation to what we're experiencing at this point in time, and you know, process. Well, I'm going to go through a few different options and what people may have in mind in relation to expressing their opinions in relation to what's moving forward, and some of them it is it's to protest. And I've had my experience with speaking at public events previously, and yeah, it's interesting though. We should be really quite aware moving forward that a lot of the there's a lot of social engineering movements. I was involved with the Occupy movement when that happened in 2011 for Occupy Wall Street, but we should just be aware and use our intuition a little bit as much as we can in relation to social engineering constructs that are created as sometimes as controlled opposition groups, etc. So just be mindful of that moving forward. And there is a lot of truth coming out now as well. So if you can check this out, Cops for COVID Truth. So people are starting to wake up to what's going on and speaking out on in all areas, in all professions. Politics, encouraging people to move forward in relation to politics and political aspirations. It's a long game, but encouraging people to use that as a platform to move forward and be able to express what's happening for them. And we are needing leaders to step up and move forward into what we're about to create moving forward. Legal action as well. There's legal action to take it can be, again, a long game and sometimes expensive, but it is another area of action for us to be able to take moving forward. If you can check out in Australia, like Advocate Me and some of those other organisations there as well, including, check this out, there's the Concerned Lawyers Network in Australia, Australian network of lawyers who are concerned about laws being improperly used against Australians. So check that out. In relation to spiritual practices, the reason why I've thrown this in here is because of the fact that when any of these type of regime changes have tried to enact this, normally what they've done is shut down any form of spiritual practice, any forms of tyranny, any dictatorships. The first thing they do is they try to shut down spiritual practices. So we're encouraging people, if you're that way inclined, whatever that is, whether that's prayer or meditation or getting grounded in nature, to really double down on that and start getting your spiritual practices in order for you to be able to be as clear as possible and to be able to sharpen and focus your intuition as much as possible moving forward. Deprogramming, so removing the externalization of the external forces of propaganda through mainstream media, and even to a certain degree what we've been experiencing the last couple of months in relation to censorship. Again, if you go to the Event 201 website, you can find all the information there, including what they were planning on doing in relation to censorship and controlling any other narrative apart from their official versions of events. So deprogramming, whatever you're dealing with at that point in time, this point in time, just removing as much of that as possible as you possibly can. And I know for some of us in isolation that it's been tough, and we're using social media, etc., as a surrogate and an artificial form of connection. But and again, something's better than nothing, but we should do whatever we can to get connected with each other and what's real and what's important. And using your own, don't believe anything that I say. I just encourage people, I don't tell people what to think. I just encourage people to think and do the research for yourself. Health and well-being. So fundamental, the basis for moving forward in relation to this transition, and I'm going to be talking, there's some financial aspects, but fundamentally health and well-being moving forward. So this is, for some of us, can occur like it's happening very quickly. And a lot of this has been in planning for a long time. So there's sometimes that we have an experiences, I know that I do, have experiences at time of like it's happening all very, very fast and quickly, and have experiences of sort of overwhelm. So keeping our mental and physical health in peak and optimum shape, the best that we can to our ability, and looking after our physical machinery as much as possible and getting that in order. I should know, because I've like had this whole journey as well. This is me, drank like a fish and smoked like a chimney, and really got on a mission to get myself in shape. And this is me at about 105 kilos, and that's me back down to about 84. So I try and keep everything in balance, and not so much it's about ego or narcissism or whatever. It's like I want to be able to play in this arena for the long game. We're going to play the long game in relation to this. So community, I want to talk about people creating community, and we've been working with a lot of clients that have, all over the world, but also that have had to transition into different places and relocation, but encouraging people, again, it's not anything drastic all of a sudden, but encouraging people to start moving in the direction of creating community. We have digital communities, etc., which is great, but strongly encouraging people in moving in the direction of creating physical community. People are talking about, EMF-free communities, sustainable communities, intentional communities. Just start moving in that direction of community. We're working with a couple of people that are heading in that direction at the moment to create sustainable housing and gardens and food and alternate currencies and all sorts of things. So just encourage you to, it might seem and occur that you've got obligations and commitments, but just start, that you have to be responsible for, but just to start heading in that direction in relation to community for this transition. Growing food, the ultimate act of rebellion is sometimes not what you think. And for some people it's a spiritual practice in relation to growing food, but I've got a background in horticulture previously, so it takes a little bit of time to learn, get connected with the earth, with the soil, and learn about these things, work out what grows well with what, companion planting, how long it takes. You can't just, you've got to plan a long way ahead if you want to eat Brussels sprouts or whatever it is that you're into, right? So it's just having people, and again, it might be difficult for you if you're living in an apartment or whatever. You can get planter boxes, you can join community gardens, you can get a group of people together and start creating community gardens or on a plot, etc. So it's just start moving and heading in that direction as well. So I'm going to touch on this. This is a sensitive subject in relation to vaccine coercion, and you could spend hours just discussing this. But the interesting thing is that particularly with what's happened in Norway just recently in the last 48 hours, but this is one of the memes I've stolen from Dave Winnigs here. I've indemnified the vaccine companies so that if you're harmed or die, you can't get compensation. And now I'm seeking to grant the ADF and foreign powers immunity from criminal convictions in case you get hurt or killed by them. Or just remember, we care about your health, so keep your mask on. And then what's happening at the moment as well, this whole psychological manipulation that's happening as they're trying to transition people in relation, they don't have the ability to be able to enforce it. So it's really, this is all by consent. So people have to give their consent before so the Ticketmaster have moved forward in relation to this, and this came from the end of last year, that fans will need proof that they've had the vaccine or negative COVID test result to attend concerts and sports games, etc. when they return. So that was released, and then they did a backpedal on that. So a lot of the information here is sort of written and put out by lawyers in their defence. No, Ticketmaster won't have to force you to have a COVID vaccine, and they denied it, but then they went into detail further here. We won't force anyone to do anything, it said in the statement, but if we did, this is how it works. So all that information's there anyway, so check that out. And just indicating this for some people, if you want to do some more research as well, check this out by the Rockefeller Foundation there, the scenarios for the future of technology and international development, or lockstep. So check that out for yourself as well. And also in relation to this as well, this article here, or this website for the Rockefeller Foundation, and I don't even know what to say about this, COVID-19 National Testing and Tracing Action Plan. So check that out. That's all on the website there for the rockefellerfoundation.org. So check that out. And then also in relation to the news that's come out in the last week or so as well, about no international travel by the likes of Qantas, etc. until 2022, which sounds strikingly familiar and similar to the conversation that they had in March, that it was only going to be 2 weeks. So yeah, it's unlikely no overseas travel for Australians until 2022, but they're going to try and push that out as long as possible to force, to coerce, I should say, as many people as possible to be vaccinated. So privacy, encouraging people we coach people in multiple areas, and one of them is in relation to privacy. So like as I said earlier, that you can pretty much assume that unless you're using any form of encryption, that all your communications are open for surveillance and for data harvesting. So we encourage people to use Signal app. Some people use Telegram as well. Telegram's okay for group chats with thousands of people. Interesting enough, the volume of, since the internet censorship and Twitter fiasco recently, the quantity and the volume, I think there was like 25 million people joined Telegram in a day or so, and Signal app also crashed because so many people joined and started using that platform. Though there are agendas underfoot to in attempt to control or outlaw. So this is from about a month or two ago, the Austrian press reporting EU Council of Ministers have almost complete resolution on the table to ban end-to-end encryption on apps like just disregard WhatsApp, but Signal app, for example. So just be aware that there'll be an intention to limit people's usage of encryption. Banking. So one of the main areas that we work with clients and that sort of thing is in relation to banking. And why is that? And it's because I've spoken about it publicly and previously way back as far as 2014, November to December 2014. So a lot of people don't realise that there's both the National Australia Bank and Westpac banks were bailed out by the US Federal Reserve for emergency funds. And you can do your research into that. The US Federal Reserve is actually a private corporation. It's not a government entity. And yeah, they were bailed out at that point in time. And the reason why I'm raising this is because of the bailouts that were effectively passing the debts onto the citizens at that point in time. But this has got the potential, and I've done interviews with other people that are far more knowledgeable than I am in relation to this, and they're saying that it could be like at least 10 times plus worse than what we've experienced in the GFC of 2008, 2009, based on the current trajectory that we're on at the moment. So this is what happened at the G20 in Brisbane in November 2014. The G20 passed what they call the bail-ins to hit depositors and pensioners. So this article's from the 2nd of December 2014. Yeah, so there's more information. They taught the Zero Hedge article, called it the day money died. And the G20 Cyprus type bail-in, so if you want to know what a bail-in is, in effect, is rather than the government, which is already broke, bailing out a bank, if it fails, what happens now is it's a bail-in. So what that does in effect is treats all the shareholders of that account as the account holders of that account as shareholders, and if the bank fails, as what happens in places like Cyprus, where they enacted the bail-ins, people woke up in the morning with something like 47.5% of their money skimmed out of their bank accounts. So that's the real concern about why we're working with clients and getting them across where they're at with their banking. So the coronavirus heightens fears that bank deposits could be wiped out under ambiguous laws. And people say to me, well, but there is meant to be like a $250,000 guarantee in place for banking, and that's true to a certain degree, but that has been amended as well, and in the wording it says, and any other instruments. So what that means by any other instruments is that it also applies to retail banking, so banking deposits, etc. So technically they could still do it and argue that it didn't apply because it was written in there. So this is ABC again as well, so there's more information in there. Check that out in relation to what bank bail-in. So I've been talking about this for a while, and this is an interview that I did with Robert Barwick of CEC, talking about the cash ban and bank bail-ins. But interesting enough, talking about censorship, we had about 8 years worth of videos and thousands of subscribers in our YouTube channel, which got deleted by YouTube in December. So we've had to restart our YouTube channel again and from scratch, and we're up on other platforms now, so check us out, and please subscribe to us on BitChute and Rumble, etc. So yeah, other economists are talking about what the Australian banks are preparing for the bail-ins of retail deposits. So that's that. So check out the bail-in stuff, and I'm going to talk about digital fiat currency as well. So I touched and mentioned cryptocurrency earlier, and that's really what I was passionate about, based on what they call decentralized currencies. And decentralized means no governments own it. Effectively, only the community and the people that have that currency are the shareholders of that. So there's also an agenda at the moment to roll out digital fiat currency, and this is where is that from? I don't know, it hasn't got the date on it, but Australia's central bank launches digital currency projects. So they already use digital currency in the back end for themselves anyway, for their accounting systems. That's that article. This is what I wanted to raise here in relation to digital central currencies, and this is really why it's the concern, and that relates to this article here that's highlighted. And where is it? The ASEC chairman, I don't know whether he's still current ASEC, Greg Medcraft, and this is his quote here: I'll start that again. With central bank issued digital currencies, you might not need a bank account anymore, Mr. Medcraft said. A digital fiat currency, while convenient, would also be convenient for the government, able to be taxed, tracked, and confiscated at will. So it's a highly efficient system for them to be able to issue centralized digital fiat currencies, because yeah, it's the ultimate scenario of surveillance and you know, withdrawing people's privileges, etc. And that all integrates with what I was sharing earlier about the social credit system, etc. So just getting people up to speed, we work with clients and just work out where their debts are. Not all debts are bad, some debts are good, but wanting to have a look at clients and where you want to get really straight with yourself, insightfully straight about where you are with your debts at the moment, and particularly debts that are not needed, debts that are not serving you, debts that if we were to, you know, entering this phase at the moment, any unnecessary debts. So because the reality of the situation at the moment is like, it's not what's happening, well, it's not why it's happening, spending a lot of time. I know I've got a lot of friends that do a lot of research and watch a lot of videos and that sort of thing. It's not really, that can be a distraction for many of us as well, because it's not what's happening or why it's happening. It's actually what we've got to be concerned about is the impact of what's happening at the moment. This massive contraction on the scale, even like if you're a student of history, if you look at the Great Depression, happened in 1929 to 1933, over those 4 years was the bulk of it, but that period actually went out to 1939. So it ran over about a 10-year period. So this is the real concern that is the elephant in the room that's not being addressed, and that's coronavirus will bankrupt more people than it kills, and that's the real global emergency at the moment. And then there's some parallels drawn there with the Great Depression, as I mentioned, in relation to Harry S. Dent's book called The Greatest Depression Ahead as well. So this is not a new conversation for us, because we've been talking about it and sharing it for a while. These are articles that go back. This is from, we shared this in October 2018. World economy at risk of another financial crash, says IMF. This is again 15th of October 2018. Financial experts predict a crash worse than the Great Depression under Trump. And this one here, Australia warned to prepare for a severe housing collapse and banking crisis. And that was December 11, 2018. So we've been saying that for a while. So that's the bad news out of the road. So the good news is, for those that are prepared and some of the clients that we work with, is that the greatest transfer of wealth the world has ever seen is right before us at this point in time. And it's going to catch a lot of people off guard that are not prepared for it at this point in time. And that's why we're working with clients in relation to that. And then also in relation to assets, like getting across where you're at with your assets. And this is how we work with clients. We go through all these different things, and some of these things are relevant and people are interested in, some of them they're not, but that's up to you as the individual. So we're getting across risk. The first thing we do is look at risk, and particularly in relation to banking and finances, etc. Debts, as I said before, mortgages, etc. Considering multiple income streams, people have to look at the reality of the situation at the moment. If they're not going to, if they think that they're going to have to be vaccinated to keep their job, they choose not to be vaccinated, they're going to have to diversify and get organised in that regard. Getting up to speed with your superannuation, etc. Getting people and getting clients in control of their superannuation, not having it in stock markets or industry super funds and that sort of thing as well. Cryptocurrency, again, educating, I've got a background in that, people in the team, we can do high volume cryptocurrency transactions for clients. So we can do anything between, well, we set up accounts for clients. You can do it yourself if you want to once it's set up, or also you can, through a brokerage, we get about 30% discount because there's volumes for clients that are purchased. You can purchase anywhere between $2,000 to tens of millions of dollars worth of cryptocurrency, if that interests you, and we can facilitate that for you. And then we also talk to people about precious metals, etc. as well. Just touching on cryptocurrency, funnily enough, this is the presentation that I did at the end of November in last year. That's November 2020, and I think Bitcoin was around about 23,000 at that point in time, and it's gone through a rapid rally. So that was like the 14th of October, 4,700, and then it, yeah, Australian dollars AUD, it like spiked as high as 53, and I think it's sitting around about 47.5 or something at the moment. So I know that it can take a little bit of a stretch to understand what it is, and people say it like it's not based on anything of value, etc., etc. So we really simplify it for people and make it easy. So you don't need to understand what it is. You just pick up the phone and say, oh, I want to buy $5,000 worth of Bitcoin or whatever, and then we just make it happen for clients. And then for also that anyone's interested with our partners, I'm going to post a link in this video as well. And for anyone that's watching the recording afterwards, we'll send you a link for, so you open up your own account and get $10 worth of free Bitcoin as well. But it only applies to people in Australia and New Zealand, unfortunately. So that you get to get in and have a play with it and understand it, etc. Precious metals as well. I'm going to touch on precious metals, and I know we're running a little bit over time here, but this is a friend of mine, Anthony, and who runs Paradigm Shift actually. And this is an example here in relation to the price increase in the value of precious metals. So a 400-ounce bar that he's holding in his hand there, worth $1 million, and now worth $1,065,000. So that's an increase of $185,000. So what I wanted to explain to people in relation to cryptocurrencies and precious metals, it's not necessarily about the fact that that commodity is going up, because what's happening, as I mentioned earlier, so effectively with quantitative easing, which is pretty much just cranking the money printers, or it's actually typed in digitally, it's not so much that's the price of the precious metal or cryptocurrency that's going up, it's the devaluation of the currency. And for people that have experienced or travelled internationally, I collect notes for a long time, and in part of my collection I have Zimbabwe notes. I have a Zimbabwe note that is for $100 trillion, and that's really quite amazing when you think about what happens as far as hyperinflation is concerned and how currency starts to lose its value. I'm going to touch on superannuation really quickly as well. So for some of the clients that we work with, thinking about and getting organised, contemplating getting your self-managed super, getting control of your superannuation for yourself. If you get to do that, if you've got it in precious metals, if you've got it in cryptocurrency, etc., it's really well sophisticated. You get to log in to your own superannuation account and check it out for yourself. There's some clients that have done very, very well with their super in the last couple of years. And if you're dealing with an accountant, etc., they'll tell you things like you can't do anything with your super, you shouldn't worry about super unless you've got a couple $100,000 or that sort of thing. But we've done some amazing things with clients that don't have a lot of money, and what you have, you're entitled to it unless you get responsible for it and start getting things in order. It becomes very vulnerable. So wanting people to encourage to get that up to speed. That's all the charts in relation to your back end for your superannuation, etc. So this is what we do: is we work with clients to turn this, and I understand the feeling of anxiety about what's happening for people, and be able to look at minimizing risk. The first thing is we run through I'll explain a bit more about that, but we look at risk, the income, a diversification of income, security of income, strategy around that, strategy around debts, strategy around your assets. It's not so much like what's happening for you at this point in time, it's really what you want to be, where you want to be in 2, 3, 4, 5 years, even 10 years time by 2030. So the people that get to be responsible for these things and start getting these things in order get to take advantage of what's happening at the moment and get themselves organized to get in that position. So assets, privacy, getting all your privacy up to speed in all your communications for your text messages, phone calls, emails, internet browsing, GPS tracking, all that sort of thing, getting clients up to speed in that, and then getting a strategy in place. So that's how we work. So just our offer for anyone that's watching this, if you're interested, if you think that we can be of assistance for you. So for a limited time, up to the end of this month, we're offering 30-minute complimentary calls with clients valued at $197. And what we do with clients is we sign that we decide to work with after the call, after the initial 30-minute call, we sign off on a non-disclosure agreement. We keep all the information private, and then we give you a strategy questionnaire about where you're at, where you want to be, etc. And then we sit down and we do a 2-hour one-on-one strategy session with each person individually, and that's recorded for you as well. And then we also have set up all the meetings for all those different areas for you. So the meeting for your superannuation review, the meeting for your cryptocurrency consultation, if you're interested, if you're not interested, if you want to do it yourself, if you want a broker to do it for you, if you want to trade, we do there's a free cryptocurrency trading course that we throw in for clients as well, if that's of any interest to you. For some people it is, for some people it's not. We also do set up a meeting for tax minimization and asset protection, and then also a meeting for getting all your privacy, etc., and everything up to speed. So this is us, Paul Seils and Associates, PSA. If you go to paulseils.com, you can jump on there and it'll automatically book a time for you that's whatever works for you, convenient, and automatically, once you book it, it'll generate a link for a meeting for you whenever it suits. So if it calls you and it resonates and you want to have a chat to me, please jump in and set that up. It'll automatically do that for you. Just go to paulseils.com, and I'd love to hear about what you're up to and what your concerns are, etc. So I said, yeah, for a limited time probably till the end of this month, we're offering a complimentary 30-minute discovery call. So I want to leave you with this in closing. So it's like I said, it's not it's the end of something, and it's the beginning of something new, and there's the turbulence and the disorientation of being with that process as we be with that. So I'm going to share this message from Garrett Laporto from the Wayseers Manifesto. Created this for us, and I hope this video has been of value to you, and you got something out of it, and just encouraging you all to get your affairs in order. And if you're interested in getting us to assist you with that process as well, we'd love to do that. And some of you are competent enough to be able to have as much of that done for yourselves as possible. So I want to leave you with this video from Garrett Laporto, because it's a super interesting week and it's a super interesting year. I really appreciate you all listening. I want to share this message with you in closing. I hope you enjoy it.
Life is a conversation between the lowest expressions of physics and the highest expressions of the spirit. Plato said, there is this realm of ideals which shines forth into our reality, creating the world in its image. But we find ourselves too often in the pits of despair, the pits of antagonism, where we are pitted against each other, fighting for scraps, fighting for power over one another, fighting for what we think is right in the face of so much opposition. And when we are entrenched in these battles, we can call on a light, a transcendent light, the light of the Most High. And this light that is within each of our hearts and minds, this light illuminates our hearts, our souls, our consciousness. And that is our opportunity going forward in this world to create the world in the image of love. For love, when released into the world, goes on and on, reforming, reshaping the world in its own image.
Thank you. Much love.